Hello, everyone, and welcome to From the Stands College Football Game Day Show. It is Week 12. And joining me again for the 12th time, I have Mr. Andy Hopper, Mr. Tom Scavetta. How's it going, gentlemen?
I'm not gonna lie, I feel like shit this morning, but I'm here and ready to talk little college football.
What a trooper. How's it going, Tom?
It's going good, kind of happy with the results last week to an extent. A lot of good games to talk about, and I'm looking forward to it. This is going to be another good week, and as we were talking about, a lot of sketchy games on the schedule this weekend.
Indeed. We'll quickly jump into a recap of last week, Week 11 action. Tom, what caught your eye? What games were you watching?
Um, while Andy and I think Andy picked Baylor with me. Um, give credit where credit is due. The Bears outscored the Sooners 17-7 in the fourth quarter. Uh, Caleb Williams started the game, had two picks, didn't look very good. We saw Spencer Rattler come back in. Then they went back on that. They put Caleb Williams back in. Abram Smith and Jerry Bohannon, each with over 100 rushing yards. The Sooners were outrushed 297 to 82. You're not going to win football games that way. And the committee, look, we've bashed them a lot this year over the last 2 weeks, but I'm going to give them credit where credit is due. They knew something was up with Oklahoma, but so did the rest of the country. We knew they were bound to lose, and that field goal at the end um, just gives a little more entertainment towards the end of the game. I wonder what would have happened if they missed that field goal because the student section was already on the sidelines ready to rush the field. Imagine if they missed the field goal and then there's a rush that happens right after that. Um, that's one takeaway I had, and then two other games quickly. Um, Texas A&M losing to Ole Miss. Now that the Aggies have three losses, how will this impact Alabama in the college football playoff standings? Well, they're currently still slotted at number two. Jerry Early, 152 rushing yards for the Rebels, and they had over 500 total yards of offense. So give credit to Ole Miss. And then I'm going to talk about my Notre Dame fighting Irish, beating Virginia 28-3 on the road without several captains. Avery Davis, senior receiver, out for the season. Kyle Hamilton missing his third straight game. People before his injury were talking about him as a top five pick. So who stepped up in this game? Well, the running game stepped up. We outrushed UVA 249 to 82. Now, granted, they were without Brennan Armstrong, but when you pitch a shutout till the last 2 minutes of the game, it's going to improve your stock in the rankings, and it did. Notre Dame is now sixth in the AP poll and eighth in the college football playoff. Give credit to Bo Bauer, senior linebacker, and Riley Mills, who might be the new version of Isaiah Foxy. Two sacks on the day, gets the game ball from Coach Kelly. I love it. So those are my three games this week.
All right, Andy?
Rock Chalk Jayhawk boys, 57-56 in overtime. Lance Leopold puts his nuts on the table and goes for two. The Jayhawks walk out of Austin with their first road conference win since 2008. 57-56 with their backup quarterback, I might add. Jalen Daniels, 21 for 30, 202 yards and three scores. You have Devin Neal, the freshman from Lawrence, Kansas, 24 carries for 143 yards, three tutties. Have a day, Kansas. Congratulations on that big win. Wake Forest in an absolute shootout game, which they always seem to play each week, 45-42 over NC State. Hardman with 290 yards, three touchdowns, three interceptions. Wasn't really able to take care of the ball in this game, but it still wasn't enough for NC State. Wake Forest gets it done at home. They move to 9-1. Huge game with Clemson coming up this weekend. And the last one I wanted to mention was, guys, is 28-3 now the most dangerous lead in football? It has happened once again. Mississippi State on the road upsets number 17 Auburn 43-34. At one point, Auburn is up 28-3 in this game. Mississippi State rattles off like 40 unanswered points. Will Rogers throws for 415 yards and six touchdowns. I'm back to fading Bo Nix, back to saying Bo Nix sucks. I do think he hurt his ankle or something. I think he might actually be out for the rest of the year. But those are my three games. I thought those really stood out the most to me.
Yeah, the 40 straight points one. That was I turned that game off. I was like, this is ridiculous. Come on, Coach Leach. And then Coach Leach does what the Leach man does, and they rattle off 40 straight. Another quick one, Michigan State taking a little bit to the line here, 21-17 against Penn State, who's been an up and down team. But they got it done. That was a game they definitely needed to win. Obviously, you mentioned the Baylor game. Storming the field, push them off the field. Lincoln Riley just blows up, and then they do kick that field goal for. He did say it was for tiebreaker points, which I guess that kind of makes sense. But before they had mentioned that, I thought it was just like a petty, fuck you, Lincoln. We're sending the field goal team out there now. We're not going to QB
That's
kneel.
what it was.
Yeah, in the back of my head, I think that's what was going on there. And there's another quick one here that I had. Not finding it though. Oh yeah, the Ole Miss Texas A&M game. I was on my way to a dinner on that one. I'm not a radio guy, but I had to listen to that one on the radio, and I don't know if I've heard a more dominating radio call for a team. I mean, I'm in Tampa, so I'm pretty sure the radio that was coming through was like a neutral coverage. But yeah, everything. It was Ole Miss. Texas A&M just seemed like they're getting absolutely dominated, and Ole Miss does come up with that win. So that was a notable one for me, for the old for the ears, as opposed to watching on TV. We'll jump into our first segment here, which is road trip. We have 3 ranked top 10 teams here going on the road this week. I want to ask you guys, who is most at risk of losing this road game to an unranked team? We have, firstly, number 10 Wake Forest going to Clemson, number 6 Michigan going to Maryland, and number 9 Oklahoma State taking on Texas Tech. Tom, we'll start with you. Who is most in danger here of a possible upset?
I really want to say Michigan, and you guys know why. But I can't. They won with defense last week. Aiden Hutchinson had 3 sacks, continues to improve his draft stock immensely, and David Ojabo, that pass rushing duo, they're going to give the Terps tackles fit, so I'm not going with that. I'm going with Wake Forest, number 10 at Clemson. Clemson's actually favored by 4.5 in this game. DJ Ukulele, I mean, we could say what we want about him. He hasn't had his best year. But Will Shipley has been a good running back for them, 7 scores on the year. And I like Miles Murphy. I like Balin Spector, Trenton Simpson, James Skalski. I think those are guys you have to look out for. Clemson defensively, their defense has not been the problem. Their offense has. Yes, Sam Hartman does have 30 touchdown passes on the season. But Andy brought up a good point earlier. 3 interceptions last week in that shootout against the Wolfpack. The Wolfpack shot themselves in the foot with 14 penalties. That's why they lost the football game. Look, Wake Forest really lacks defensively. They have given up 100 total points over the last 2 weeks. They lost at UNC 2 weeks ago, 58-55, and then they squeak by 16th ranked NC State at home, 45-42. So if you're giving up 58 points to UNC, 42 points to the Wolfpack, you're definitely most at risk, considering Clemson isn't really an unranked team. They are, but we all know they really aren't. They're just having that down type of year. I'm going with Wake Forest here.
All right, Andy, who's most at risk?
I agree with Tom. I think it's Wake Forest. I think the other two, they don't have cakewalks this weekend, but definitely easier games than going to Clemson. And I think Clemson is by far the best defense this Wake Forest team has played yet this season. So it'll be interesting to see how they, to see how they, kind of respond to that on the year. Wake Forest is averaging 498.4 yards a game. Clemson only allowing 308.9. So it's going to be the real, the unstoppable force versus the immovable object. in this game for me. We know, I mean, this is a spot that Clemson is not used to being in, right? They have the opportunity to really play spoiler here and throw another conference loss onto Wake Forest's resume and potentially kick them out of the ACC championship game. I think Clemson's got a lot to play for. Obviously, Wake Forest has got a lot to play for. Going to be the best game out of the three of these that we have here. And I think, Wake Forest is definitely on upset alert this weekend.
Yeah, this is gonna be a sweep because they're my pick as well. Although I will say a close second, I think, is the Texas Tech Oklahoma State game. Um, Oklahoma State all season, they're almost kind of like Auburn-ish, in how we didn't really know, how they'd be. They had that loss to Iowa State, and they've rattled off three pretty good wins in a row. So they've kind of settled down, but Texas Tech, they're not a slouch. They also dispelled of Iowa State last week. It was a close one, but this is a night game at Texas Tech, a very late game. Well, I guess they're an hour behind. For me, it looked a little late. It's 8 p.m. game, but yeah, for me, it's Wake Forest as well. Clemson is favored at home in the fake Death Valley. Death Valley for me is always going to be LSU. But listen, Clemson still has a shot at the ACC title game. That sounds ridiculous to say right now with the three losses they've had. But if they win this game, they're still in the hunt for the ACC title game. So, Dabo's been here before. Maybe not with the losses, but this team is gonna be put together very well. Their defense is very good. It's probably gonna be the best defense Wake Forest has played all season. So we're gonna see a battle, and if they can force Sam Hartman to make a few mistakes, get a few interceptions like NC State did, they could be in a little bit of trouble here. So yeah, just an absolute sweep there. I guess that means take a watch of that game if you're looking for a game to watch this weekend, because Wake Forest is on upset alert. Gonna move on to next segment here. Let's go bowling. Got a lot of teams out there, 4 or 5 wins, looking to go bowling. There's still 22 open slots. Of the 82, I believe 60 have qualified so far for bowl games. We're going to go down the line here, pick a few teams, who we think will slide into those last 22 slots. Andy, we'll start with you. Who's going bowling this year?
Ladies and gentlemen, the drought has ended. This is the year. Sing us a song, the Shiano Man. Rutgers is going bowling. I'm calling it right now. They currently sit at 5-5, so they have Penn State this week, which, by the way, Rutgers plus 17. Hammer it. Penn State is not that fucking good. They're 5-5 right now. They have Penn State, which they're going to Penn State. I'm not saying they're going to win in Happy Valley. I don't think they are, but I like plus 17. But they end the year with Maryland, a Maryland team that's that's in an absolute free fall right now. Maryland has lost now. Oh, okay, just 2 in a row. They actually beat Indiana, but still, they're not playing good football right now.
Right.
I think this is definitely a winnable game for Rutgers. I think they have 2 winnable games for Rutgers. I don't think they're going to be at 7-5. I see Rutgers at 6-6 and back in the bowl conversation. And then, do I give my second one now too?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Then my second one is going to be the school that freaked the fuck out when they hired Greg Schiano. It is Tennessee. Feels like 98 in Tennessee. Just kidding. Not exactly 98, but they're 5-5. They actually seem like they're playing decent, competent football. They're not bad. Hendon Hooker is actually a pretty decent quarterback with, 2,100 yards and 22 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions on the year. Big ratio guy, Brian. Anyway, Tennessee has South Alabama at home this week. We know how the SEC likes to get their cupcakes in before the end of the year. So you'd like to assume they're going to beat a 5-5 South Alabama team. Then they close the year with Vanderbilt at home, who's 2-8 and the doormat of the SEC. So I think a 7-5 Tennessee makes their way back into a bowl game as well this year. So Rutgers, Tennessee, those are my 2 teams.
All right, well, we're getting a double dose of Rutgers action because Rutgers is on my list as well here. This team has not been to a bowl game since 2014 when they had a little man named Nova as their QB, who was actually very good. I think he was in the Heisman hunt for a while, and then just kind of faded out. I don't think he even ended up getting drafted. Um, but listen, Rutgers is in probably the toughest division, I would think, right now in the Big Ten East. They've had to play three top 10 teams this year. I know, typically there's usually two or three in the top 15 there, but right now they're at 4, 6, and 7 between those three top teams: Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State. And listen, Maryland, they're struggling. They've lost 4 of the last 5 games. Talia likes to throw it, but it's watching him throw. I love the kid. I think he's going to be great, but it's nerve wracking. I would think if you're a Maryland fan, and I think they could definitely pull off that win. Maryland has another tough game this week. I think they play Michigan, so they're probably going to lose that game pretty handily. I think they're going to be a little sad, a little disappointed in all these losses, and I think Rutgers is going to pull off that 6th win against Maryland, and Shiano's getting his bowl game. I know Rutgers is usually the butt of the jokes, but we're pulling
They're
for him
back.
pulling for him this year. They are.
Rutgers, Maryland, week 12 or week 14 is, or whatever, the last week of the year. It's a loser leaves town game. So
Yeah, there
winner
you go.
goes to a bowl, loser's out of here.
Exactly. And then my second one, I'm going with the Florida State Seminoles. They have a much tougher road here. They play Boston.
Tom's face. He doesn't like that one at all.
They play Boston College on the road and go to Florida, but I'm picking them because to get them into the bowl, that would mean they would have to go into the swamp and beat Florida, which I would absolutely love. Florida's ranked preseason number 13. You guys know how much I hate preseason rankings. If Florida State, with how bad they've been this season, can knock off Florida in the swamp, that would just be such a slap in the face to all of Gators Nation. I love to hate on the Gators, so listen, the Boston College game, Boston College is decent in conference, though, only 2-4, so I think FSU can probably rattle off these last 2 wins. God, I would love to see them win in the swamp, so I'm pulling for FSU as my second team. Tom, I'll move to you. Who's going bowling?
You know what? I knew this was coming, but let me save that for my second team. You'll see why in just a moment. But my first team is the Tar Heels of North Carolina. They're 5-5. They host Wofford this weekend. Should be an easy dub. So, maybe a vanilla pick right there, but I think they'll get their 6th win this weekend. And then
my second one was vanilla, so it's okay. I'm with you.
And then they visit NC State the following week. I think Sam Howell has been playing more efficiently down the stretch. We saw him put up 58 points against a Wake Forest team. Ty Chandler, 13 touchdown rushes on the season. And then I really like Josh Downs. People were saying, well, who's going to fill in for De'Ami Brown this year? It's been Josh Downs. 82 catches, over 1,100 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So UNC is my first team. I think they're going bowling. A little bit of a disappointment with the 5 losses. A team that was should probably still be ranked if everything went right for them this year. But it's unfortunate. The ACC's had a down year, but I think they're going bowling. Now, for my second team, Brian, I'm going to disagree with you and take the Florida Gators. I think they're at Missouri this week, winnable football game. And then they host FSU, a game that they should win. Look, they scored 70 points against Samford last week. Now, yeah, the whole year it's been Emory Jones, it's been Anthony Richardson, it's been Emory Jones, it's been Anthony Richardson. I mean, they can't pick a guy, and it's really sad. It is really sad. I think next year that'll be a non-issue. But remember this: we're looking deep down at Florida's 5 losses. They played Bama when Bama was number 1. They played Georgia right when they became number 1. So 2 of their 5 losses are essentially to the top 2 teams in the nation. Now, has that taken a lot out of them? Of course. But I think the quarterback controversy has played into this, but I think they're going to win at least one of their final 2 games. So go Gators.
All right. Tom, you shook your head at that one. I'm going to have to shake my head at that one. for the Gators, but we will see. And we're going to move on now to our next segment, which is our shots and chasers. If I can fade this out, there we go. We got some nice games on the spread here, but a lot of sketchy ones, like you said earlier, Tom. A lot of teams that could go down. A lot of top 10 games on this sheet. We'll start with the first one, probably the biggest one of the entire weekend. As far as the college football playoff goes, we have Ohio State taking on Michigan State. This is at the Shoe. Michigan State has a big win against Michigan, but this is probably a tougher matchup here. Andy, we'll start with you. Who do you think's taking this game?
I think I have to go with the Buckeyes just for the fact that, they're at home, and I question if this Michigan State defense is going to be able to stop their passing attack. I mean, they're allowing 329 pass yards per game. Ohio State's averaging 353. We know about CJ Stroud. We know about these just insane receivers they have on the outside, Smith and Jigba, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. Where do you want me to fuck? I mean, I could keep going. I mean, the only reason I think Michigan State has a chance in this game is, of course, Heisman candidate Kenneth Walker III. If they can get him going, I mean, he carried them to that win over Michigan, which I still maintain they didn't deserve. Michigan blew that game. But neither here nor there. I think Ohio State gets the job done. I don't know about this spread, though. Ohio State minus 19. That seems like a little high. So we'll see. I just question how the Spartans are going to stop the Ohio State passing attack. I think it's going to be too much for them.
Yeah, I agree. I'm on the Buckeyes here as well. They pretty much cancel each other out on the ground game as far as rush defense goes, which is interesting because these are two of the best backs in all of college football. If I they had leaned, I guess, a little bit more on Travion Henderson at the beginning of the season, Ohio State, I think he could be right there, alongside Kenneth Walker in the Heisman hunt. He was, when we did our Dark Horse Heismans earlier, Travion Henderson was one of my picks. Probably, a little bit of a stretch.
Fine. Just keep patting yourself on the back, Brian.
No, it's a big stretch because he's a freshman, but like you said, they just have so many weapons. It's hard to just focus on one guy, and I agree. The most concerning thing here is that pass defense for Michigan State because C.J. Stroud has gotten into a rhythm and he's lighting it up. And it's a little bit ironic, honestly, because Mel Tucker has taken this team from his first season last year, 2-5, to this fantastic team. He was a DB coach at Ohio State back in 2004, and their biggest problem is their own secondary. So that's a little weird to me. But I mean, even if you watch the games, you can tell that the secondary is probably the link in the chain that's the weakest. So if CJ Stroud starts lighting them up early with all these weapons he has, opens the game up for Travion Henderson, I don't think just having Kenneth Walker is going to be enough here for the Spartans. So I'm going Buckeyes. Tom, who's your pick?
Well, each team has one loss, right? Michigan State and Ohio State, they're both 9-1. Ohio State lost to Oregon, but what's important to remember here, guys, they're undefeated in the Big Ten. They average over 46 points per game on the season. That leads the nation. The nation, over 46 points per game. CJ Stroud has only been sacked 7 times all year, so give credit to the Buckeyes offensive line. Partially due to the reason why Stroud has been able to throw 30 touchdown passes. He's looked really good. And then you mentioned, Brian, Travion Henderson on the ground pretty much cancels out the impact that Kenneth Walker III could have on this game. Henderson has 14 rushing touchdowns in his own right. And Andy mentioned the receivers. Smith and Jigba, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave has 11 touchdowns. Not to mention, Michigan State, I don't know if I trust Peyton Thorne going in on the road in the shoe. I mean, they lost to Purdue by 11 points. Yes, Kenneth Walker III is a Heisman candidate, second most rushing yards in the country, and has those 17 touchdowns, which is important. But Andy brought up a good point just a minute ago. The Spartans' defense is very suspect. If Ohio State gets off to a large lead early, that's going to minimize the impact that Walker can have on this game, right? Because Thorne's going to have to throw the ball a lot more. which, granted, the Spartans have two of their top receivers averaging over 18 yards per catch, but you're going up against the Buckeyes defense, which isn't too bad either. Not to mention, we look at this series all the time. Ohio State has won 5 straight against Michigan State. They've had their number. So clean sweep here, guys. Ohio State goes on top on Saturday.
All right, and then our chaser in the noon slot. This was on our road trip segment. This was also a sweep here as the sketchiest of the 3 games. We have Clemson taking on Wake Forest at Death Valley. Clemson obviously ranked in the top 10 still with that loss. Like I said, Wake Forest ranked in the top 10, but Clemson still with a shot at the ACC title. Andy, we'll start with you again on this one. Are we seeing the upset?
I think we might be seeing the upset. This feels like a game that might be just too big for Wake Forest. This feels like one that they might not have enough firepower, and it's what we talked about earlier. It's defensively. I think Clemson has enough to shore up this attack that the Demon Deacons are going to roll out with Hartman. Clemson's only allowing 15.3 points per game on the year. They don't allow a lot of, guys to get loose. They don't allow big plays. They don't allow touchdowns. Only 111 rush yards and 197 yards through the air allowed per game. Wake Forest is going to have their work cut out for them. I'm taking Clemson. I'm taking the upset. I know Wake Forest only needs one win to wrap up the Atlantic Conference, or not the Atlantic Division in the ACC, but I think Clemson plays spoiler. As much as I hate to pick Clemson, I think they're going to win the game.
I'll tell you what, I think we might see another sweep here. I'm also taking the upset. Listen, Clemson started the season very, very slow, very bad. I know we all laughed at them, but they've kind of gotten it a little bit together. Obviously, they're not a threat for the CFP or anything, or any probably big bowl. But this team's looking pretty good lately. Their only loss in the last 5 games was to a ranked Pitt, who personally I think is a very, very good team. Kenny Pickett, obviously, I don't know if he's in the Heisman hunt anymore, but he's a solid QB, probably one of the best QBs right now, and I think he'll be one of the highest draft picks. So that's an excusable loss for this Clemson team that's kind of had to reset a little bit. This Clemson secondary, he's only giving up 9 passing touchdowns all season. That's going to be a problem for Sam Hartman, who loves to throw the ball. He's got 30 touchdowns himself, but this is sort of an opposite scenario of the Ohio State-Michigan State game, where Wake Forest doesn't really have a running game if Clemson can stop them through the air. So this is going to be very problematic here. A.T. Perry is the guy to stop for Wake Forest. He's got 11 receiving touchdowns. If they slow him down, this offense could come to an absolute halt, and that'll be interesting to see how they adjust if that does happen. But at the end of the day, I just really think this Clemson team is not as bad as we laughed at earlier, and Wake Forest to me is still not as complete of a team to where I look at them and say, okay, they're deserving of this top 10 ranking and should easily win this game. So I'm going upset as well. Tom, are we a sweep on the upsets, or are you going Wake Forest?
Yeah, look, it was an absolute disgrace that the committee decided to rank Wake Forest over Notre Dame when the initial rankings came out. Like, you want to talk about a slap in the face? I mean, that pretty much just ruined our pride for a full week, and finally they put us over them. We predicted that they were frauds, and it turns out they are frauds. Look, Clemson's won 3 games in a row. The only concerning factor for the Tigers in this game is that they're 0-2 against ranked teams. But their defense is, you guys have been praising that, and they have the 3rd best scoring defense in the nation. They're at home. Wake Forest will not be coming out on top in this game. It's going to be Clemson. Make that the 2nd clean sweep in a row.
All right, moving on to the midday slate. We have number 2 Alabama taking on the Arkansas Razorbacks, ranked at number 21. This one on CBS. Tom, we'll start with you for these. I guess this would also be an upset. Are you taking the upset here as well, or is Alabama holding on?
Brian, I remember about a month ago you were praising Arkansas. You were praising Arkansas. You were picking them as an upset against every team. Usually you're spot on with your predictions, but that was one that eventually went crashing for you. Um, how Alabama is favored by 20 and a half points in this game is crazy. I actually think they should be favored by at most 2 touchdowns. But here's the thing. There's a lot on the line for Bama in this game. They clinch an SEC title berth with a win. They will enter the SEC championship game if they win this game. And we look at Bryce Young, who's probably the leading candidate for Heisman at this point. Uh, 33 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. People were concerned. Who's going to replace Mac Jones? Bryce Young says, just raises his hand in the back of the classroom and says, no problem. I've got it from here. Brian Robinson Jr. has replaced Najee Harris. It doesn't matter. The names change for Alabama every single year, and they're still the same team. We're talking about Bama having a down year, and they're ranked second in the nation. Jamison Williams, the Ohio State transfer, has 10 touchdowns. John Mechie III, look, he's dealt with some injuries this year, but he's still there. And Will Anderson Jr. has 12 sacks. The Bama defense is very, very good. Now, here's where I get concerned. Very concerned, actually. Arkansas beat Texas A&M earlier this year 20-10. Who did Alabama lose to this year? Texas A&M. So if we're basing this off of common opponents, you would pick Arkansas, right? Well, can't do it. I'm going to pick Alabama in this game, although that Razorbacks defense does scare me. Bumper Pool, 100 tackles on the season, and then Monteric Brown with those 4 picks. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think, but the Crimson Tide should be able to squeak this one out.
All right, Andy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like what Tom brought up. It's this rush offense from Arkansas, number 6 rush offense in the nation. They've got 4 guys with over 450 rush yards on the year. That includes KJ Jefferson, the quarterback, who's thrown for 1,917 touchdowns, as well as the 450 I think he's ran for on the ground. How does Alabama deal with that? I think they're only allowing 81 81 and a half yards per game on the ground. Will Anderson Jr. is leading the nation in not only sacks with 12, like Tom mentioned, but 24 tackles for loss so far on the year. He's going to be essential for the Tide in stopping the run. Alabama's won the last 14 meetings against Arkansas, going for number 15, and this is just like an insane stat. To any Hog fans out there watching, I apologize, or cover your ears. Alabama has outscored Arkansas 252-80 over the last 5 meetings. That's an average margin of 34 points. So I think this one is going to be a lot closer than that, like Tom said, but I'm really hard pressed not to take the Tide here. I love Jamison Williams on the outside, over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns on the year. We've talked about him all year, coming over from Ohio State. He wanted to be that number 1 target. He wanted more playing time, and he got it at Alabama. So I'm taking Alabama here. Arkansas, I think they do have more of a chance than people are giving them credit for here in this game, but I think it's all about just pounding the rock and seeing what you can do against this Alabama defense. They have to limit the mistakes as well. You cannot make mistakes, especially on the road at Bryant-Denny. So,
yeah, I'm going Alabama as well. Tom, thanks for calling me out, guy.
Yeah,
I was very hard towards the Razorbacks there. I will say that. Listen, they're a very fun team to watch. They still are. KJ Jefferson is a fantastic player, and he's really fun to watch, both through the air and on the ground. But the problem here is that Alabama's rush defense is just too good, led by, obviously, like you guys mentioned, Will Anderson. They're only allowing 81.5 yards on the ground this season. Something interesting that was brought up on SEC Nation was that last week against LSU, who is more of a traditional, mix it up passing and throwing team, similar to Alabama, I would say, especially this season because Max Johnson, and Bryce Young are both good through the air and very accurate was that Arkansas switched to man coverage when all season long they've been going more zone. So it'll be interesting, I guess, this week to watch if they try the same thing against Alabama, because I don't think they're going to generate enough offense here to if Alabama scores even just 28 points, I think this game is probably over. Just because of how stout that rush defense is, which is where Arkansas has been eating up a lot of these teams. So that's going to be the battle for me to watch. You guys already covered the weapons. I mean, Bryce Young, yeah, Heisman, probably I think favorite right now. Um, and Jameson Williams, what a transfer grab for them. So I'm going with the Tide as well for this one. Sorry, Arkansas, I've got to get off the Razorback train a little bit. And then moving into our chaser for 3:30, we have Cincinnati ranked number 5 right now, taking on SMU. This is probably Cincinnati's toughest game of the season. Lost camera feeds a little bit there. Hopefully those come back, but Cincinnati's toughest game of the season so far. Going to Dallas, or no, sorry, this is in Cincinnati. All right, feeds are back. Okay, Andy, we'll start with you on this one. We seen an upset, or is Cincinnati getting probably their best win in the committee's eyes? I would assume this weekend.
God, I hope they get their best win. I want Cincy in the playoff. I predicted they were going undefeated on the first episode of this show. But this is a test. This is going to be a test for Cincinnati. We've seen them struggle with teams that they really should be handling in the past few weeks. Obviously, I think this past week, they beat USF 45-28, kind of got back on the horse a little bit. But, a one-score game with Tulsa that Tulsa probably should have sent into overtime. What else? Navy kept it close. SMU has a chance in this game, and it's Tanner Mordecai, guys. He's got 3,200 yards, and he's second in the NCAA with 37 touchdowns. They're gonna throw the ball. They're gonna test Sauce Gardner. They're gonna test Kobe Bryant, and we'll see who wins that battle. Look out for Hall on the out. Or no, I'm sorry, not Hall. It's Dan.
May have lost the video feeds here for a second. Hopefully those coming back soon. Think we've lost audio as well. Are we back?
Are we back? Did we lose? Are we good?
Yeah, you froze and then screens all went black, but I can hear you guys now. So
okay. I don't know.
You're talking.
What anybody heard?
You're talking up to. I got up to Sauce Gardner, then we lost you. Testing Sauce
Gardner, and they're gonna test Sauce Gardner. They're gonna test Kobe Bryant in the secondary with this potent passing attack. The Mustangs are averaging 329 yards through the air. Is it still out?
Yeah, your audio's still good.
We're fine?
Yeah, the audio's still fine.
Okay. Yeah, you're pretty choppy too. Okay. I'm all thrown off here. Anyway, what to watch for? The Cincinnati defense is really fucking good. They're only allowing 164 yards through the air. This potent SMU passing attack. We'll see who kind of wins that. 41 points a game for the Mustangs so far this year. Cincinnati's only allowing 16.2. Who wins that matchup? Desmond Ritter's got to take care of the ball. This needs to be a statement victory for Cincinnati. I'm taking the Bearcats. I think SMU covers the 11 points, though.
All right, Tom.
Well, Andy pretty much talked about it all with Tanner Mordecai. He also has, he lets it rip. Seventh most passing yards in the nation as well. Danny Gray's a threat. So is Rashee Rice, 8 touchdown catches. And defensively, they have Devere Levelston with 6.5 stacks. Now, the real question is, what's Cincinnati been leaning on this season? Their defense and their run game. If SMU gets off to a hot start, Cincinnati's going to have trouble coming from behind. They're not a team that's built to come from behind, and this is what scares me. Jerome Ford has 15 touchdown rushes on the ground. Desmond Ritter also with 5 touchdown rushes in his own right, but their leading receiver is Alex Pierce, who only has 4 touchdowns on the season. So I can't take a shot at the guy because he ripped us a new one a little over a month ago. But defensively, sixth fewest points per game allowed in the country. Deshaun Pace, Kobe Bryant with 11 passes defended, and Ahmad Gardner, Sauce Gardner with the 3 picks. So this is really tough. I really want to pick Mustangs in this game. You guys know I'll be rooting for the Mustangs in this game. If they get out to an early lead, you're going to hear it from me. But the Bearcats. The Bearcats. They will not cover that spread, but the Bearcats are going to win.
Yeah, I'm taking Cincinnati as well. I do, listen. These last 3 games have been a little sketchy. We've seen a lot of teams play some sketchy games against unranked opponents. We've talked about it all year, the season of parity. But I think this team hasn't been this good in probably at least over a decade. And I think they were looking ahead. They knew everyone was talking about, the weak strength of schedule. I think they were looking ahead to this game, and that has slipped them up these past few weeks. But they did still leave with the W's. But listen, Tanner Mordecai lit us up last week. My UCF Knights. He has 37 touchdowns this year. But listen, this is a very good secondary that he's going up against. Ahmad Gardner still has not given up a touchdown. Teams just don't want to throw it to him. That's how good this kid is.
Sauce.
Yeah, sorry. Sauce Gardner.
Yeah, thank you.
But now you're throwing me off. Yes.
Shit. Yeah, how does it feel?
The
Test.
the sauce is very good. Kobe Bryant on the other side also very good here. So I think I agree pretty much with all your assessments. Cincinnati wins the game, but the spread probably a little too high.
11. That's a lot of points.
Yeah,
Feels
but
like a lot of points.
I think the most notable thing for me, at least on the win side, is that SMU's last 2 losses have been on the road. So, and this game is in Cincinnati. I think that will. I mean, those fans are going to be rocking. I know Tom didn't like it when I brought it up about the Notre Dame game, but those fans are behind this team 100%. This is probably their one shot, unless we get a 12-team playoff in the future, to get into the college football playoffs. So they're going to be rocking. That stadium is going to be rocking, and I think they pull off the win here. Then going into our late game slate, we have ranked Oregon, number 3. People don't like to see them that high, taking on a ranked Utah, number 23. This game starts at 7:30 on ABC. Tom, we'll start with you. This an upset, or are the Ducks going to pull this off?
We've had 4 clean sweeps so far through our shots and chasers. I don't think that's ever happened since the 3 of us have been on this show. You know what? This is where things get interesting a little bit. Oregon 9-1, Utah 7-3. Utah is actually favored in this game by 3, but I've got to tell you, since that overtime loss to Stanford, Oregon's looked pretty good. I think Anthony Brown is okay. He's a serviceable quarterback. He's not going to lose you football games, but he is their second leading rusher with 8 touchdowns on the season behind Travis Dye, who is also averaging 6 yards per clip and 12 touchdowns. That is their strength. That is the teeth of their offense, the rushing attack and the offensive line. They lost Penei Sewell to the draft. They've replaced him just fine. Their receivers, that's where there's an issue. No receiver has over 2 touchdown catches on the season. So they haven't been very good. There's really no key player to watch on the offense. So you could pretty much key in if you're Utah on Dye, on Brown, and defensively, this is where Oregon really shines. Noah Sewell, 79 tackles, 3 sacks, 5 passes defended. Verone McKinley with 5 picks. However, Utah does have 3 losses on the season. They were all on the road. Utah is 4-0 at home, and they're going to be home this weekend. Cameron Rising has been rising as of late. 14 touchdowns, 2 picks. Tavion Thomas, 14 touchdown rushes. And I like TJ Pledger a lot. I think he's a good complementary back. Also, over 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. This Ducks defense has not seen a team this year yet that has had 2 running backs rush for over 500 yards. And we got to give love to the tight end. Brant Kuth, 5 touchdowns. Dalton Kincaid, also 5 touchdowns. Utah Utes love their tight ends. Devin Lloyd, defensively, linebacker, 6 sacks, 3 picks. Reminds me of Devin White a little bit. Nefi Sewell, Noah and Penny's brother. There's a battle of the Sewells in this game. So that's going to be interesting to watch. And it's crazy. If Utah wins this game, they could meet again in the Pac-12 title game. This
Yep.
could be a potential thing that could happen. But you know what? Oregon's heavily favored in this game, according to the rankings. And that's why I'm going with Utah. I'm going with Utah in this game. Number 3, Oregon is going to get upset by the Utah Utes and lose any chance they have at the college football playoff. And once again, prove to the committee why they should have never been ranked 3rd in the nation, despite their win over Ohio State. The amount of bias in this committee when making these rankings is absurd. And we're going to see 2 top 10 teams go down again this week. Actually, 3, including Wake Forest.
All
Utah
right.
Utes.
There we go. I think there may be a little bit of an agenda behind that pick.
No shit.
Wanting to see the Ducks go down. Andy, are we seeing an upset or no?
No. Let's go Ducks. Actually, I don't know. I am gonna take the Ducks. This game has a lot of meaning for both of these teams, right? Tom mentioned it. The Ducks need this. They are ranked 3rd. Need to keep stacking those wins. They sit at 9-1. If they win this game, or if Arizona State beats Oregon State, the Ducks have officially locked up the Pac-12 North and will be heading to the Pac-12 title game. But on the other side, Utah wins this game, they lock up the South, and they head to the Pac-12 title game. So a lot on the line for both of these teams here. Obviously traveling to Utah, I really like what Cam Rising has been able to do for the Utes since replacing Charlie Brewer, and Brewer taking his ass elsewhere earlier in the season. The Ducks looking to make it to their 3rd straight conference championship game. A guy that I want to mention is the freshman running back from last week. I'm sorry, I just had his name right here, of course. Byron Cardwell. Remembered Byron, could not remember Cardwell. Byron Cardwell, the freshman running back, 98 yards, 2 touchdowns last week against Washington State. That running back room for Oregon is banged up right now. CJ Verdell, I don't think, is coming back at all this season. Obviously, you have Travis Dye, who's been a mainstay. Love him. No gloves. Shout out to Travis Dye. He is closing in on his first 1,000-yard season for the Ducks as well. I just think Oregon has too much here. I'm taking the Ducks. It is a homer pick because I do like the Ducks, but they are in a more backs against the wall. Have to have this game. So I'm taking Oregon.
All right, Tom, I think you thought you were going to be alone with that Utah pick, but I'm taking the Utes here. I talked them up earlier in the year, and you shook your head at me. Now you need them to win for your Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Just give him.
There's the
every
ricochet. There's the ricochet.
We always got to throw in a ricochet here. Listen, Travis Dye has been phenomenal replacing Verdell for the Ducks, but Utah only allowing 139 yards on the ground per game here, and probably, at least what I could find, the most similar top quality running back was that game they played against UCLA in Zach Charbonnet, who's a very solid back. They only let up 146 yards on the ground to UCLA in that game. Obviously, most of them to Charbonnet. He had 65, though. So that's pretty good. I think that's going to be the most similar running back they've faced. But the defense, it's pretty good for Utah. It's pretty stout. Listen, Anthony Brown is one of those guys. He's not a Bo Nix, but I still wouldn't say I don't entirely trust him. He's a senior, so it's not like sort of freshman jitters. It's making him make mistakes. Like Andy, like you said, they have sort of settled down and fallen into a bit of a rhythm here. But let's not forget that Washington game was a one-score game until very, very late. We were talking about Baylor's petty field goal. Oregon went with a petty touchdown. in that game to make it look a little bit better in the committee's eyes. They had a close game against UCLA, 34-31. UCLA has been struggling a little bit, so um, Oregon is not without their own mistakes this year, and I think this is a perfect opportunity for the Utes in their thin air. Maybe make Oregon a little lightheaded, a little dizzy, and take the upset here. So I'm going with the Utes as well in the upset. I love the chaos, so feed me all of it. Give me the Utes. And then in our chaser slot, we have another top 10 team taking on an unranked team on the road. Another team from our road trip. No one picked them as the biggest risk for the upset, but we have Texas Tech taking on number 9 Oklahoma State. This is at Texas Tech late at night. Andy, we'll start with you on this one. You didn't go with the Utah upset. Are you going with a Texas Tech upset?
No. This one I'm more sure of, too. Texas Tech isn't beating Oklahoma State. They've got a revolving door at the quarterback position. Columbi, who's sucks. He's, I don't know if he's either hurt or benched. Tyler Shuck from Oregon came over. He sucks. Last week they had, hold on, what's his name?
Donovan Smith.
Donovan Smith came in and played, so that's the third quarterback they've played this year. There's no real consistency at that position. I will say that Oklahoma State needs to watch out for Eric Izukanma. I don't know if I said that right, but
We'll take it.
Poke, yeah, probably not. Pokes fans hear that name, probably start shaking in their boots. He has 10 catches for 275 yards and 3 touchdowns over the past 2 seasons. That Texas Tech has played Oklahoma State. Career high 183 yards receiving against the Pokes last year. Obviously, that's going to be a little harder for him this year. Oklahoma State, like I've mentioned on this show before, they're not the typical Oklahoma State we're used to seeing. This is a defensive football team. Mike Gundy has been known throughout his career for having, those offensive squads that are with a lot of firepower that may leave a little something to be desired on the defensive side of the ball. But this is a defensive football team. I think they go into Lubbock. I think they get the job done. Malcolm Rodriguez has been the anchor for this defense at linebacker, 93 tackles. He's 5th among FBS active players with 327 total tackles. So I am taking the Pokes here. I think they win, and I think they win easily.
All right, Tom, are you going double upset in our late night games, or Oklahoma State holding on?
Well, I haven't picked the road team yet this week, and I think it ends here, guys. The Cowboys have the 8th best scoring defense in the nation. Now, granted, they did lose at Iowa State earlier in the season, but the Cowboys are looking to win the Big 12. That Oklahoma loss last week, it helps the Cowboys out. It helps Baylor out. Warren is that 1,000-yard back with double-digit touchdowns you look at. Sanders can run as well. He hasn't been losing his team games under center this year. Tay Martin and Brennan Presley are 2 solid receivers. Colin Oliver, 6.5 sacks. Colby Harville-Peel with the 3 interceptions. You have weapons all across the board for the Cowboys. And if you're the Red Raiders, this is a rough way to end your season. You have this game tomorrow, and then you're at number 11 Baylor next week. And Andy, you talked about the quarterback carousel, which is very much a factor. There's no great pass rushers on this defense. The only player on their defense that I think has a legit shot to make the NFL at the moment is Colin Schooler, because he takes opposing skill players to school more often than not. 3 forced fumbles and 1 pick on the season. He's been a really good linebacker for them, but it's not going to be enough. The Cowboys are going to win this game and improve their stock. They may see a legit jump as well if we see the upsets we're predicting to this week.
My only concern, if I can have like 10 more seconds, is this might be like a look-ahead game for Oklahoma State. Like, they need to make sure they're focusing on Texas Tech and not thinking about Bedlam next week. And not, they need to look at the task in front of them. Definitely could be a trap game, one that you're just not thinking anything of Texas Tech, and you're just looking forward to that rivalry game next week. But I still think they're going to get the win, but that's my only concern.
Yeah, I'm going with Oklahoma State here as well. You brought up how this is typically an offensive team, Andy, and the defense is sort of leading the way for them now. I'm going to say that's due to Coach Gundy cutting that mullet off. Used to be business in the front, party in the back, and he would sling it. The mullet's gone. Now it's just business everywhere.
He's a man.
Yeah. So Spencer Sanders, he's. It's almost a similar situation to me as Michigan State, where they don't have a QB that can produce as much as at least they normally have, especially in the Big 12, where it's points, 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 yards, yards, yards. But listen, this defense is very good. They've only allowed two touchdowns in the last 3 games. So Texas Tech, you don't want to hear that when you're cycling through 3 different quarterbacks because you can't find one that fits. This 10 wins, and it'll be the 10th time to get 10 wins in program history. Sorry, it's tongue teaser there. If they can pull off this win since 2010. The thing that concerns me is that these games get into shootouts between these two teams. They've combined for at least 75 points in 8 of the last 9 meetings. So this
Take the over.
Yeah, there you go. That does seem very hammerable, the over, but that could be something that makes this game a little bit iffy if we do start seeing points flying on the board here. I don't think it's going to happen though, because like you said, Andy, Texas Tech has no idea what they're doing in the quarterback slot. Usually, you need to have that sorted out if you want to get into a high-scoring, high-producing offense. But that is going to wrap up our last game on the Shots and Chasers. That'll wrap up the show. If you want to you want to subscribe, it's right down there below. If you want to see Andy and Tom's shows, boom, Andy, Tom, also down in the description. How can you not subscribe to that face over there? That face over there.
I know how.
Enjoy the games this weekend, and we'll see everybody next week.